Hello and welcome or welcome back. In this video, we are talking about this crazy, massive, amazing alignment that is wanting to come through for us. I'm going to go through the visual that I got. And if you've been feeling any sort of fogginess or lack of clarity, then what I received will, I'm intending, help you understand that a little better, as well as move through that into the clarity that you're seeking, and more so into the alignment. Because what a lot of us are thinking is we need more clarity when it's alignment that's being called for instead. So we'll talk about what that means. If you are new to my videos, then welcome. I'm very glad that you were divinely led here. I am a collective channel. I have been channeling energy for the collective for years now. And for the first time, whenever I tune into the collective, the spiritual piece, the guidance, the energy does not feel stable. Not that it ever has felt stable. It's very fluid and it's very expansive. I'm going to go into more of what I mean by that. There seems to be a fog, and this is unlike any spiritual fog we may have experienced before, so we don't have a reference for how to navigate it. Whenever I tapped into the energy specifically of this fog, I received the message that it is, and I'm going to read this, the illusory separation between where we find ourselves now and what is truly ready to be experienced by us. So I want to read that one more time. The fog is the illusory separation between where we find ourselves right now and what is truly ready to be experienced by us. And we move through this fog through baby steps of becoming more and more the version of us that is beckoning us forward. And the visual that I got specifically was two versions of self, the old self and the new self, and this fog separating the two. So this fog is, of course, an illusion. We know, spiritually speaking, quantumly speaking, that the new or future version of self already exists. But like many illusions, it can feel unclear. So as I mentioned, we're meant to move through this fog by baby steps that we're guided to take. And through choosing to anchor in more and more of the frequency of this new version of self, we move through the fog and we become one with that new version of self. And this is the process that we're going to be going over in this video today. And I intend to bring more clarity to this because I know it can be maybe a little abstract. So what I want to begin with is discussing what it has felt like for me to be a collective channel and how these energies are so different than I've ever experienced after years of doing this work. I've always been able to pretty easily tap into collective energies, to guidance and teachings that want to come through. I have been doing YouTube since 2018 on my other channel. And in fact, whenever I sit down to meditate, the first thing that comes through is often collective energies. And I've had to set a boundary with spirit whenever I just want to tap into my own personal energies or speak to spirit, just me, rather than tapping into the collective. So recently, when I've been trying to tap in, I feel a fog, one that I haven't really felt before. And the fog is because as an awakened collective, so we are just speaking to those who've been on this spiritual journey, those who've been on a path of ascension. For this collective, we've been hanging out between timelines. And the messages that would come through on the old timeline are not an energetic match. And the new timeline hasn't been fully anchored. So we aren't ready as a collective to fully receive and digest the energies of that timeline. So that's why when I'm tapping in, I'm seeing a fog because we're in this in-between energetic state. And this is why the main message every time I tap in, what wants to come through the collective has been centered around embodiment. And my ego is like, I can't create another video around embodiment. I've already created several on this channel. That was the first video that I created, was about embodying heaven on earth. So that was my ego's reaction. But I know and I trust that these are such important energies. And that is why they're being emphasized, because we need to essentially anchor in to everything that we know, to anchor in the guidance that we've been given, to continue to work on a human level, right? With our nervous system, our minds, habits, patterns, so that we can fully anchor into the frequency of this new version of self, of this new timeline. We're not meant to be just chilling in between these timelines. We're meant to be embodying and anchoring in this new version, this higher frequency ascension timeline. This is the energy of the new human, one that we've probably heard talked about, or there's been teachings about. Maybe we've even received our own visions or downloads about what the new human looks like, what the new earth looks like. But at this moment, we are being called to live as this new human. And that is where the alignment piece comes in. And that's why this energy really wanted to be presented today in a spiritually practical way, is the verbiage they're giving me. I've noticed whenever I'm talking to others recently, I have found that others are experiencing this in-between energy in many different ways. Many what we would call this practical, everyday, wanting to eat differently or consuming different content, or something that they enjoyed watching or enjoyed reading doesn't resonate any longer, but maybe they don't quite know what does resonate right now, or they just don't have a taste for certain foods, but they're yet to find those that feel supportive and those that feel most nourishing to them. Or I know also a lot of people are discovering, okay, this is what is supporting me right now. Oh, I want to eat this way, or I want to begin structuring my days this way. So it feels like this trickling transition energy where we are becoming very clear on what doesn't feel good. We might not have any sort of logical reasoning for it, but we just know it doesn't feel in alignment. And we are in the process of understanding, of searching and allowing for what does feel quote unquote right to replace that old energy. So we're really in this space where we're asking ourselves, how do I want to live? What do I want to consume? And by consume, I mean through your mind, through energetic experiences, situations, friendships, right? What am I wanting to allow in my reality, in my field? What is supportive for me? And that is all part of this alignment process. Those answers are going to look very different for all of us, but we're in the process of uncovering what truly supports us and not what we think we should do, not what others have told us is the most aligned way to live, but really asking ourselves, what supports me? What feels right for me in this new chapter? And so if you've been feeling any of that as well, you are not off. You are right on time for this transition, right where you're meant to be. So in this video, I want to break down this alignment energy into main themes that I've tapped into. And the first theme that is coming through is this is a time of mastery. There is less emphasis on spiritual teachings and more of that emphasis on embodiment. And seeing the embodiment is the mastery. And it's your authentic embodiment. It's not the embodiment of how we think we should be as an ascended human. It's not the embodiment of maybe another master that you have studied under, that you're familiar with. It's not that embodiment. It's not their embodiment. This is your authentic embodiment of your mastery. And we uncover this by taking in everything that we learned on our journey, right? What we learned on a very cognitive level through our mind, but also what we learned through our own healing process. Taking all of that and asking, how can I live more in this way? What parts of my journey do I want to live in now? And I invite you to ask yourself this now. What is the most authentic way I could live right now? Just take a moment, ask yourself this, allow the answers to come through. What is the most authentic way? What feels best for me that I could live right now? And how can I be truer to myself than ever before? This is the time that we're meant to step away from the student into the master so that we can enter a new age of studenthood. It's not that we're never the student, we're shifting into mastering, embodying, anchoring what we've already learned, living it. And once we have grounded into that version and that timeline, then we are open to a whole new wave of divine light technologies, wisdom, teachings, guidance that will only be available to us once we are in that energetic state of this current mastery. And again, the mastery comes from asking yourself, what's the most authentic way I can live right now? So in this moment, we're simply meant to apply and work to embody the wisdom we already know. And we've already been doing this, right? This is not completely new. It's just asking ourselves, is there any part that I'm being called to embody more and more? And as we go through the rest of this video, certain things might come up for you as well. The second piece of this that is wanting to come through more so as a reminder is something that's taking us out of alignment, and that is the mind. The human mind is still wanting to remain in control. It's still trying to grasp for what has worked before. It's trying to grasp for just that right teaching, that new piece of wisdom, more clarity. And it's simultaneously telling us we should do something. We should go for it. And we're not ready yet. We're not ready to pursue it, right? So if you've been noticing that tug of war, which actually came through in the activation that I put out on my other channel, then you are certainly not alone. It's part of this transcendence and alignment process we're going through. So the mind is creating subtle sabotage moments, making us believe that we're not ready, not good enough, that our authentic knowing or intuition is still wrong. We shouldn't trust it. And at the same time, putting pressure on us to be this new version of self, to live our manifested dream life. So we can get stuck in this loop of doubt and then searching for more clarity to help ease that doubt. And I'm not saying we're not meant to get more clarity. I'm just trying to bring up the process for your own reflection of what the mind might be doing. You might already know your answers, right? But the mind is creating this doubt And then it wants to get clarity to alleviate the doubt, and it keeps us in this loop. So, this is not saying at all we're not going to continue learning. Anything that you're learning now that feels good and right and expansive to your soul is part of your new time embodiment. But if you reflect on everything you've already learned about yourself throughout your journey, everything that you've learned about the true nature of the universe, right? We know how things work. You'll realize that you already know, and know with a capital K, higher knowing, you already know what to do. Even if your mind says, no, I really don't, then taking the smallest step based on the one piece of clarity that you do know, the one piece that you feel confident about, opens a pathway for more guidance and more direction to come in. So, for example, let's say you know, deep inner knowing, you are here to create something new, bring something new into this world. And your mind wants to know exactly what that looks like, exactly what that is. And that's when we can get into the doubt, needing more clarity loop that we talked about. What's being called for in this alignment phase is one baby step that would get you one step closer to creating that. Maybe that's writing down a list of all your ideas. And then maybe after you have that list, it's expanding on one of those ideas and it's following it more and more. And as you allow yourself to follow those baby steps, just following what you already know, you are going to become very clear on the old parts of your identity, those old energetic blocks, those old programs that need to be released, healed, transmuted, because they are not a part of this new version of self. But you can't uncover those parts fully until you allow yourself to move in that alignment, until you allow yourself to take those baby steps. It's not until we allow for this anchoring of what we already know to be true that the next steps are revealed. And I know, spiritually speaking, as someone who has done a lot of transmutation just through meditation, I sometimes forget that some of the greatest transmutation, some of the greatest quantum leaps happens in that real time where you follow an inner knowing. You do it even when the fear is there. You allow whatever comes up to come up. And in that moment, you send that part of you that is not in alignment, you send it love or healing, or you surrender it to the divine. That's where the true quantum leap often happens. But we can get stuck in thinking it only happens in meditation or in a very spiritual capacity. And as we allow ourselves to move now, to actually move with this energy, to move in the alignment, we are becoming more and more that embodiment of the divine in our waking, walking life, right? Outside of the meditative spaces. And that's another element that's being called for in this alignment phase. And that is not just knowing the divine is all powerful, or the divine is unconditional love, the divine is fulfillment, peace, and grace, but allowing ourselves to really integrate those within us, allowing ourselves to be more and more in that space of what we know the divine to be throughout the moments of our days. So maybe just taking this very moment now and letting yourself sit in this. What does divine embodiment mean for you? Whatever comes up first, what does that mean for you? And let's just take a moment in stillness, even if your ego doesn't want to. That's okay. Let's just take this very moment in stillness to breathe into that. Your divine embodiment in this moment. And I know that much of what we're talking about are things that we've already done in some capacity, things that we're already doing. We wouldn't have gotten here on our journey if we weren't already implementing this. If we weren't already allowing more and more of that authentic, divine embodiment to expand within us, to move through us. This is not saying you're starting from scratch, saying take where you're starting from now and allow it to align even more, to expand even more. And that moves us into the next energy of this collective alignment phase. And that is centered a little bit more around clarity, gaining clarity about clarity, I guess. And so I wrote down, you already have the clarity. And we're going to discuss the underlying reasons why you might not feel that you do. So let this part of the video meet you where you're at in your journey, because I know that we're all experiencing clarity and guidance to different levels in different ways. So just allow what we talk through to meet you where you are and help you expand in your clarity. And the first thing that I want to mention is there's certainly more clarity to come. It's not that we already know everything and we're good. But what I'm seeing is there's an energetic block that at its core is not an actual lack of clarity. So I want to dissect the energetics of this block. And there's two pieces. It's kind of like this or that sort of situation that I'm picking up on. The first is either we've already received the clarity, but it's about the implementation. So it feels like a block because we feel like we're not clear enough, but we've actually already gotten the clarity. There's just a part of us that is scared or holding us back from actually implementing the clarity that we received. The second piece that it could potentially be is there is clarity that's trying to come through, but it's being blocked by the parts of you who are not ready for it yet. And this is because the clarity that is trying to come through is asking you to be more free than you've ever been, more abundant, more open, more vulnerable, more in your power. And those older parts of you are saying, maybe consciously or unconsciously, I'm not ready for that. I'm not ready to be that free. I'm not ready to be that abundant. I'm not ready to be the version of myself who lives this way. I'm not worthy of it. This is not my identity. It's not who I am. And because we have all of these underlying programs that are still present and attached to the old identity, the clarity that we're receiving either can't fully emerge and be understood, or it doesn't feel like it's fully landing. But it's not because it's not there. It's because there are parts that are resisting the expansion that it comes with. An example from my own journey recently is I was presented with something that I have done many, many times. And this time when I was presented with it, it just didn't feel aligned to do. But a part of me feared not doing it. And so I confused that with needing more clarity. I searched for clarity that I was in fact making the right decision by saying no. And in my own personal reflection and meditation to find said clarity, my answer was, you already know it doesn't feel aligned. The movement for you comes now from acting on that clarity. Of course, a part of your old identity who would have done this many, many times and who did do this many, many times is speaking loudly, but that's part of the process. This is the process of anchoring into the new timeline that you have seen visions of. Again, this is what I was receiving, right? This is the process of anchoring in this new timeline, taking it out of the vision, bringing it into reality. And it's not glamorous and it's not a huge quantum leap, but it is held in this moment when you make the choice that is different than what you've chosen in the past, but it feels aligned. And there was a great shift in honestly a seemingly small decision. It wasn't anything that was life shattering or huge. It was just choosing a different way. But I thought, because of an old program coming up, that I must not have been clear enough when I was clear, and the alignment happened when I honored that clarity and moved in the direction that it was calling me. So I want to segue now into another big piece of this alignment, but also a very big piece of this new timeline. And that is conscious creation energy. In this new version of self, in this new timeline, we are acting more and more as these embodied conscious creators that we know we are, right? We know that we can manifest. We have read and listened and watched many teachings on it, implemented techniques, seen how it works, right? Like you can think of something that you manifested, whether it was directly or indirectly, having that experience, like, okay, I know it works. And we also have seen how we can know all the techniques, and there still seems to be a block to some parts, to some experiences that we're wanting to manifest. But this is the phase where we dismantle those blocks by learning to trust. This is the biggest piece. And then knowing that we are source and manifesting as source. So we often manifest as humans. We do a technique, and if we have, no or little resistance to it, we stay persistent, then we manifest, right? And maybe it comes in a different form or a different way. It's just this ever expansive, fluid. We can't put conscious creation in a box. But much of the time, when we are choosing to manifest or consciously create, we are unintentionally boxing ourselves in, or boxing manifestation in. We're manifesting from our human self. And we know on a logical level, and we might have experienced it during deep meditations or healing sessions, that we are God. We are source. But we're still approaching manifestation and conscious creation from the limited human perspective. We're still wanting to know the technique, and we want to get it right, and we don't want to mess up, right? Like we're still adding these pieces of our humanness into conscious creation, and we're even categorizing it sometimes. I've seen this done a lot as like a subsect of spirituality, or I'm getting the word the gateway drug into deeper forms of spirituality, where we start maybe listening to like Abraham Hicks or like one of the, a spiritual teacher, and then we dive deeper into different spiritual concepts and understandings. But it's not that. It's not a gateway in my perspective. It's not just a section of spirituality. It is us using our power as the divine to create. God is always creating. Source is always creating. When you look at nature, there's rebirth, there's death and rebirth and cycles and creation constantly. As humans, we're always creating, even whenever you're just creating the meal that you're eating then, right? So again, it's our humanness that tried to put manifestation or conscious creation in its own special box whenever it's just us expressing as God, the divine that we are. So I ask you now, if you consciously created as God, or source, or the divine, use whatever word feels right for you. If you consciously created as the creator, how would you approach it differently? And what has been stopping or blocking you from doing this fully? And maybe you know the answers, maybe you don't. Just opening up to this opens the doorway for greater understanding, greater awareness. And really why I feel there's such this emphasis on it. It's because the truth, the capital T, is when we are consciously creating, when we're choosing what feels good for us, choosing what feels aligned, that's divine. That is us acting as God, not in the ways of the ego, not in the ways of the old power structures, not trying to play God, right? That's saying trying to play God. This is speaking of true divine embodiment, the divine within you that wants to create, wants to expand. The part that said, you know what? I've lived a lot of struggle. I've lived a lot of limitation. What would it be like not to, right? What would it be like for all of the struggle and the limitation that I lived to now experience the opposite end of that spectrum? And that requires us to let go of the egoic shoulds and should nots. Remembering there's so much flexibility in conscious creation. We can keep it general if we are unsure, meaning if you, for example, are unsure of what new job you would want, but you know you want to manifest a new job or align with the quantum timeline, quantum reality of that dream job that exists in the quantum field, right? If you know you want that, but you don't know specifically what it looks like, you can tap into the general feelings of what that would bring. You could tap into what your days might look like, how it might feel to work at that job. We can also manifest specifically. If you want to manifest something, let's say like $10,000, visualize it, affirm it, do a ritual, intend to receive it through the most ideal, harmonious path. Because there's such divine fulfillment in manifesting something specifically, of really tapping into your power and seeing it happen. So there are benefits of all ways of conscious creation. They all give us this beautiful, unique experience operating as God. When you keep something general, you see how things can manifest beyond what you could have imagined before. When you manifest something specific, you feel the divinity in that power. And I believe we're really being called to expand past the rigidity that we used to put around conscious creation, and also the rigidity that we put on what it means to be a good spiritual person or a bad ego-filled spiritual person, right? We're moving beyond that. And now it's time to expand. It's time to have fun with it. It's time to allow ourselves to consciously create from that space. And if you're ever worried if what you're choosing to manifest is not for the greatest good, you can always add this. I'm manifesting this, and it happens ideally for the highest and best good of all, for the good of all and harm to none, right? You can always add that caveat, because another piece of this that I have witnessed is we can dictate how things manifest and how they unfold, not specifically, although sometimes it does happen specifically, but rather if you're manifesting, back to the example of $10,000, you can say it happens the most ideal way, or you can just manifest $10,000 and then the energy will often flow and respond to your current belief system. So if you're very strongly manifesting that money, but your current belief system is that it can only come to you through a specific type of way, then you might be taking a pathway of a lot more convolution than you needed to. So adding in that little caveat, choosing to manifest this, it happens in the most ideal unfoldment, good of all, harm to none. And then you trust. You trust in your goodness. Trust in the goodness of your desires. And whenever you have that caveat in place, then you allow the divine to move through you, move through all in a way that is benefit to all. So I invite you to place your hand on your heart. If you can, you don't have to. And really anchor in this energy. And affirm to yourself, I'm allowed to choose more than I've allowed before. I'm allowed to choose more than I've allowed before. I'm allowed to receive more than I've allowed before. Beautiful. And then the final piece of this is the reminder not to allow the current beliefs of others, the perceptions of others, collective beliefs of this is just how the world works, to influence or interfere with you using your divine power. Again, this is a new timeline, a new frequency, a new energy, and we don't want to tether ourselves to the old by hanging on to these beliefs. And that moves us into the next energetic theme, which is things feel really weird right now. And I want to dive into the reasoning for it, which is more on a psychological level. It's not so much on that esoteric level. I feel like we all know we're in very different energy now, so that naturally feels weird. But let's bring it back to the human psychological piece of where we are as we align and as we transition. When I was tapping into this energy, I was reminded of when I was in grad school, I was a teaching assistant. That's to get my grad school paid for, essentially. And as a teaching assistant, you had to take classes on how to teach. And one of the things that we were taught was when someone is first learning something, it's best to teach in more black and white terms. This is what you do. This is what you don't do. And that really happens to us on both our human journey, right? When we're in school, when we're a child, we learn right from wrong. Not saying that everything that we're taught in and of itself is a great teaching, but when you think of a child and they're learning something, it's easier for that child to learn the correct, quote unquote, the correct way to do it, right? And then we learn, okay, this is what is right in terms of morality. This is what's wrong. And then when we move to the spiritual path, it becomes more nuanced, but often we need more structure in the beginning. You know, this is a morning routine that we can do. This is how you manifest. This is what you don't do. This is ego programming. This is divine intuition, right? We learn it's not black and white. It's far more nuanced than that. But it's more so what is going to help me expand and what is contractive, what contracts me. And we needed that. We needed that on our human journey to have the baseline of being a decent human. We needed it on the spiritual journey to gain an understanding and to gain clarity and experience of what really expands us and what is contracted and limits us and is tethered to the ego and limitation. But now we're at the point where we've integrated that wisdom. And it's time, again, I know I've said this a bunch, but it's time to expand beyond it. It's time to have fun. It's time to consciously create from that space. And we don't need the structure in the same way anymore. Now, this doesn't have to apply with everything. If you're just learning, let's say, astrology, take the teachings and build that foundation. But what I'm really speaking to are these spiritual concepts of this is how you're meant to do it or not meant to do it. It's time to loosen that, to loosen the structure. And our human mind, because this is how we learned it, finds comfort in that structure. And so that's why everything can feel a little weird, because we're letting go of the structure that has gotten us here to make room for a new, expanded way of being. But we can't hold on to both. We can incorporate some of it, right? We don't have to completely neglect the structure that we implemented and what we learned, but there does have to be a loosening, I'm feeling, of the human mind, of the human psyche into the energetics, the experiences of what this new timeline, a new version of self is offering to us. So I know for me personally, I have certainly been feeling the discomfort of this. I love learning. love clarity, love to understand everything, to like derive the meaning from things. And this at times has felt like a very uncomfortable space. For example, I have gotten very clear guidance on how my soul wants to live as a human. I've gotten it from myself. I've gotten it from readers and other channels. I know I have the clarity and I can feel into what that state of fulfillment is like. And yet, I still notice parts of myself, my habits, my nervous system, pulling me back into that older way of being that isn't fully aligned with that. So much of my personal journey was gaining this clarity and moving towards the fullest manifestation of that vision, of that experience, of that way of living. And I've certainly have been doing that. But I too have been experiencing, okay, now I'm being called to fully embody this. And everything that kind of was my go-to before really isn't so much anymore. And it's also interesting because I can physically look at my reality and be like, wow, I manifested these things. That's great. That's amazing. But there's still part of what we call the old man, that old version of self, that old humanness that doesn't fully allow me to settle in it. Which is why a lot of the work that I've been focused on in my own journey in the last year or so has been around that nervous system regulation. And I've brought that through in much of my activations to assist everyone else in that. Because we are needing to give our nervous system that space to adjust. And that's such a big component of it. Giving ourselves our humanness, not the spiritual piece, not our higher chakras, but our lower chakras, our humanness, our body, again, our nervous system, that space to adjust to this new frequency, to adjust to this more empowering way of being, adjust to new levels of trust, of love or vulnerability, of intimacy, new levels of fulfillment. That is such a major piece of this alignment. So now that we discussed all of these pieces of it, let's bring it back again to what this actually looks like, taking it from the idea of it into physically embodying it, integrating it, implementing it. And the word that I kept getting when I was tapping into these energies is baby steps. And I believe that came through in last week's video as well, as part of this new season's energy. Baby steps. Baby steps in the way that you speak, through what you choose to consume or be around. Baby steps in your routines, in your own mind, and not allowing the old thought patterns to trick you back into that old state. It's embodying that conscious creator, like we talked about earlier. What would it be like to create as God's source creator? Opening to that energy. And whenever you speak something into existence that you're wanting to manifest, speaking it from that space, trusting it from that space, persisting and walking in the assumption from that space. This is also allowing ourselves to be still and integrate new levels of light. I know for a lot, the spiritual journey is one activation after another, one purge, one healing, an expansion, rinse and repeat sort of energy. But giving ourselves just space to be still, days where we don't do anything spiritual, days that we just allow ourselves to rest and relax. Those hold such power. That's when you allow spirit to move through you. You allow everything that you have opened up to or chosen to release or chosen to manifest, you allow it to actually move energetically. because you are not in the cycle of needing to do more, needing to do more. So in the energy of the baby steps, right? Like we talked about, there's also a lot of moments of stillness and just rest and trusting the power and the progress that exists in that rest and that stillness. Another piece that was really brought to my attention was continuing to ask for divine assistance and allowing spirit to move through you. We are being called to approach life in a new way. Not through wisdom, not through teachings, but through application. And so when we invite in our higher selves energy, the energy of that new version of self, sitting in that, inviting in the energy of spirit, asking our guides for help, all of that can show you naturally, without you having to figure everything out, how to begin living in this new frequency, in this new timeline. And then with that, as you're moving through your life and you're faced with a decision, asking, what supports me most? How would this new version of self respond to this? What would this new version of self choose? How would they do things? Again, we're taking it out of a meditation into our everyday experiences. This isn't an opportunity, or this is a decision. What supports me most right now as I'm faced with it? How does this new version of self respond to this? And it's in those real life moments where the transition happens. So I invite you as much as you can to let this be simple. I know we went over several different energies, but it's not meant to be overwhelming. This process is meant to support you rather than feeling like a burden. It's meant to free you. So if any part of this feels like it's weighing you down, ask if that is because it's an old part resisting. Or it can also indicate that the ego is trying to take the reins and it's placing unnecessary pressure on you, right? So if at any point you're feeling overwhelmed by thinking that you need to be perfect in this alignment process, that's just an indication that an old part of you is hijacking your system temporarily. And you can remind yourself, there is no doing this perfect. And the only thing that I need to do in every moment is to ask what is most supportive for me right now. Right? We can just simplify it and bring it back to that. And just having that awareness whenever you're going through this transition, this alignment phase, when that old identity is speaking. I know that many are dealing with that voice of the old identity fighting to be heard, fighting to keep us in old reality, in that old state of being. When you notice this, surrender that to the divine. Allow for divine intervention. Allow for divine support. Allow the divine again to move through you, to move through all. And we're using our free will to decide to ask for assistance when we need it. And that is a pivotal threshold moment. You don't have to hold this alone. You are not in this alone. And so to end this video, let us just speak for a moment about how to stay anchored in this alignment. There are many low vibration forces that are keeping a section of the population in lower density frequencies. And it is on some level, whether that be human or soul or karmic, a choice of those to stay in those lower density frequencies until they're ready to ascend. But you and us who are drawn to an energy of a video like this, we are a force of the light. We are grounders of a new way, of new frequency forms. And this means that if there are aspects of your consciousness that are still resonating in that lower frequency energy, they're being amplified because it's being amplified in the collective. And whenever you notice them and they come up strongly, right? Those lower frequency energy forms that are still in your field, they're coming up because they cannot exist in the new state of consciousness. And they're fighting. They're fighting for you to stay in the old form of consciousness. The visual that they're giving me right now for this is if you were at the beach and you're trying to take a land animal into the water that does not want to swim, it does not want to go into the water. That animal would fight tooth and nail to stay on the land because they would not survive in the water, right? It's survival. That is what's happening with these old energy forms as we are moving into a new state of consciousness. If they still exist within your energy field, you are essentially taking them into a state where they can't survive. So they're going to fight as much as they can to pull you back into the energetic frequency where they do live and they can thrive and survive. And it's simply having an awareness of this whenever they come up, sending them love and letting them go. And anything else, of course, that you feel guided to do. But it's simply having that awareness of, wow, this is coming up strongly. It's because it can't survive in this new frequency. There's also an amplification in the collective. I love you. I let you go with love. I know you can't come with me. I call in divine support to transmute this energy in the most ideal way through grace. And I see you for what you are. And as you are moving through the collective now, we don't want to pick up on anything else, right? We want to stay really anchored in our truth. It can be really helpful to visualize that you're surrounded by a protective cylinder of divine light. And that stems from source and goes all the way down to Mother Earth, covers your entire energy field, and you stay anchored within your truth, anchored within your alignment, anchored within a higher truth, this new frequency. And you can then move throughout the collective, knowing that you're anchored in this pillar of light and in this new frequency. And then those collective energies don't have the influence on you. So it's a very simple visual practice, or you can simply intend it. And that can assist in you grounding in and can make this alignment phase easier than if you're being bombarded by all of the collective energies. And that wraps us up for today. I want to thank you for being here, for spending this time in this space with me. I appreciate you. I always put out an activation that aligns with what we talk about on my Reiki Rachael channel. It's an energy activation and a meditation to fully embody that which we discuss. I'll link to that below. I'm also going to link below different extended offerings that I feel would be helpful if you need further assistance in this. Have a beautiful and blessed morning, day, evening, and I'll talk with you next time.